Thank you for coming, guys. Art is never neutral. A painting, a sculpture, or a song all have meaning infused into them by the artist, often as an expression of his character and beliefs. In the world of music, the names of Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, Liszt, and Rachmaninoff are all very well known, but how their personality and worldview influence their music are less often discussed. However, philosophical or religious influence can be found in the works of any composer, even when it is not obvious or explicit. Along with the culture and musical eras they're born into, each composer's uniquely beautiful music is an expression of his worldview. For this recital, I will be performing 5 pieces, one by each of these 5 composers. I will explain a bit about the vision and worldview of the artist before playing each piece, with the hope that you will notice it as you listen to their music. By learning about their lives and influences and analyzing specific compositions, we may start to truly understand the art of these great composers. So, first I will play for you part of a French suite by Johann Sebastian Bach. After the emphasis on clarity and simplicity that characterized Renaissance music, 17th century Baroque composers adopted the musical qualities of mysticism, exuberance, complexity, and decoration, and focused on arousing the affections of their audience. Bach is the great master of Baroque-style counterpoint, or the art of writing multi-melody music that follows specific rules. Rather than always confining himself to tradition and rules, however, Bach was constantly refining and expanding forms and techniques. His harmonically intense music was seen as unconventional, innovative, and surprising, while at the same time meticulously calculated. Perhaps more than any other composer, Bach can jolt and shake us in a way that is never arbitrary or bizarre. Bach's remarkable balance of the concise yet developed, the complex yet simple, continues to please amateurs, non-musical listeners, and professional musicians alike. Not only did Bach possess brilliant musical skill, but also an extraordinarily sensitive Christian intelligence. He believed that musical sounds act in accordance with how God created the world, and his heartfelt Christian faith was the primary driving force of his career. Bach believed that the purpose of music was to create, quote, a well-sounding harmony to the glory of God and the recreation of the mind. However, Bach never compromised the quality of his music for the sake of evangelism or religious propaganda. At the height of his popularity, Bach chose to leave his significant secular job at Prince Leopold's court and became the cantor for a relatively small church. As an expression of his calling, Bach labeled nearly every musical manuscript with the initials JJ, Jesu Juva, INJ, in nomine Jesu, or SDG, Soli Deo Gloria, meaning Jesus help me, in Jesus' name, and to God alone the glory. David Bentley Hart, an American philosopher and theologian, outlines the unique elements of Bach's music that reflect his Christian worldview. First, Bach was excellent at demonstrating the rich complexity in the apparently simple, and helping us hear diversity as intrinsic to unity. Second, Bach's music was never arbitrary or abstract. He grounded his music in God's purpose and order. Third, Bach includes limitless elaboration and variation throughout his works, using the boundlessness of music to reflect the infinite inventiveness of God. The influence of Christian doctrine and faith are especially evident in Bach's sacred works, such as his masses, arias, and cantatas. However, the elements Hart describes can be found even in Bach's sweet and simple French suite in G major. This piece contains several voices, but the main melody is easily heard. Bach's ability to find this balance, without sounding either simplistic or overwhelming, is what Hart calls rich complexity in the apparently simple. The trills, turns, and other embellishments are never random, but always add something interesting at the right time. Bach's affinity for constant variation can be found in the suite's shifts between keys, modes, voices, and melodies. The suite contains similar sounds and tone throughout without feeling repetitive. These qualities, along with the well-planned counterpoint and chord progression, reflect how Bach grounded his music with purpose and order. The second piece I will play for you is Ludwig van Beethoven's Sonata Pathetique. In reaction to Baroque music, which was often seen as excessive or extravagant, classical composers adopted the qualities of simplicity, balance, and formal perfection. Although Beethoven was clearly a classical composer early in his career, he was already unlike any other musician of his time. Beethoven developed his own musical language, a language compressed, cryptic, and explosive, expressed in forms of his own devising. He produced music with a wide range of tones, whether triumphant, mysterious, tender, or empowered. Beethoven's most unique quality, however, is the intensely personal and passionate emotion found throughout his works, differentiating him from the likes of Bach or Mozart. The unique emotion found in Beethoven's music is primarily the result of his great affliction, his deafness. As Beethoven struggled with his growing deafness, his music achieved a new level of drama and expression. In a letter to his brothers meant to be read after his death, Beethoven wrote, "How could I possibly admit an infirmity in the one sense, which ought to be more perfect in me than in others? My misfortune is doubly painful to me because I am bound to be misunderstood. It drove me almost to despair. A little more of that and I would have ended my life. It was only my art that held me back. It seemed to me impossible to leave the world until I had brought forth all that I felt was in me." Much of Beethoven's music is forceful, longing, and passionate, expressing his will to fight against his deafness, his determination to continue composing, and his heroic resolve to conquer an unkind fate. Perhaps the most famous example of this is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which reflects his view of fate as a menace to be overcome, in an epic celebration of the will's victory over chaos. After years of dread and despair, Beethoven began to feel again the urge of the artistic and moral imperative to better the world through his music. From 1815 to 1819, Beethoven earnestly strove for a rebirth of purpose in his creative life and reached a place of acceptance. No longer did he see fate as his enemy, but accepted suffering as a necessary condition of life. Much of Beethoven's later music is religious, as he sought solace in communion with God. In his diary, Beethoven wrote many personal prayers and expressions of faith. For example, "Therefore, calmly will I submit myself to all inconsistency, and will place all my confidence in your eternal goodness, O God. Be my rock, my light, forever my trust. After becoming completely deaf, Beethoven composed his Ninth Symphony, his great Ode to Joy, which reflects his submission to God's will and his desire to glorify God in his music. In this and his other later works, Beethoven expressed an otherworldly calm and achieved an emotional depth beyond his time. At 29 years old, Beethoven published his famous Sonata Pathetique, the only named sonata whose descriptive title was given by Beethoven himself. The French word pathétique comes from the Greek pathos and means passionate, not pathetic. The sonata was composed during the period when he was wrestling with fate and has a similar tone to his dramatic Fifth Symphony. The first movement reflects Beethoven's forceful, determined, fiery personality and its intense and heavy themes. In contrast, the second movement is much slower and sweeter, a kind of calm between the storms. In the middle of this movement, a darker theme creeps back in, but soon returns to the sweet melody, as if expressing Beethoven's struggle to resist his inner darkness. In the third movement, the piece takes on a more sporadic and agitated sound, similar in intensity to the first movement, but without as much heaviness. It seems to reflect the tumult of Beethoven's mind at discovering his deafness, while ending with a resoundingly determined and triumphant tone. The sonata as a whole certainly expresses Beethoven's inner struggle and his resolve to conquer fate.
All right. Wow, what a piece. What a big piece. Beethoven. Didn't you feel the soul of Beethoven coming to us through my 18-year-old daughter from 300 years ago? Like, it's just kind of cool what music can do. So we'll have a little intermission. Let Elisa's wrists and fingers rest for a minute, and I'll come back in and we'll kick it off with the second half of Elisa's recital. So see you in a minute.
So the next piece I will play today is Frederic Chopin's Fantasie Impromptu from the Romantic era. The term romantic comes from medieval romance stories, heroic tales about distant, legendary, and fantastic events, like the legends of King Arthur and his knights. In reaction to the rationalism of the Enlightenment, romantic music is identified with a search for the original, evocative, expressive, or extreme, very different from the balanced simplicity and clarity of the classical era. Whereas classical composers created universally understandable music, Romantic composers were encouraged to seek individual ways of expressing their ideas and emotions, and to make a strong impression on their listeners. One of the most prolific Romantic composers was Frederic Chopin. Chopin used plenty of romantic emotion and freedom in his music, but he also had a strong classical leaning in his preference for traditional forms and rules. Chopin was born a natural pianist, and his consistently flowing music stemmed from his instinctive way of playing the piano. In Chopin's music, quote, "The piano became a total instrument, a singing instrument, an instrument of infinite color, poetry, and nuance." While other composers have fallen in and out of fashion, Chopin's work has always been played and enjoyed, unaffected by changes in musical taste. Even in his lifetime, his widely popular music received little criticism, and that has continued to this day. Although raised as a Christian, Chopin fell away from his faith soon after he moved to France. In the salons and high society of Paris, Chopin's beliefs received little encouragement, and his sensitive conscience caused inner turmoil for most of his life. Perhaps Chopin's strongest negative influence was the writer Aurore Dudevant, better known by her pen name George Sand. In her autobiography, Sand describes Chopin's impressively continuing faith and how her disdain of Christianity disturbed him. However, her dominant, rebellious personality soon overcame Chopin's traditional values and sensitive nature. Their relationship continued until 1847, when Chopin's inner anguish finally reawakened his fear of God. After breaking his relationship with Sand, Chopin's weak health continued to decline. There are several different accounts of his last days, but all agree that the composer made a dramatic return to his Christian faith. Chopin's friend Abba Jelowicki wrote that at the end of his life, Chopin earnestly confessed his sins and declared belief in God again. The Abba also recorded some of Chopin's last words. "Let me die. Why do you prolong my life when I have renounced all things and God has enlightened my soul? God calls me. Why do you keep me back? Perhaps you have erred about my sickness, but God errs not. He punishes me, and I bless him therefore. Oh, how good God is to punish me here below. Oh, how good God is." In his last days, Chopin clearly demonstrated a troubled conscience, heartfelt repentance, and a sincere gratefulness to those who helped lead him back to God. Sadly, a true expression of faith is lacking in his music, and the Fantasie Impromptu reflects primarily technical and personal influences. Chopin continued to perfect and polish this piece for a long time, wanting it to be as jeweled, as flawless, and as logical as possible. His use of a continuously flowing melody was inspired by Bach, whom Chopin praised highly. The Fantasie Impromptu is one of Chopin's longer, more elaborate, and technically difficult compositions. The precise and elegant melody reflects his polished style and tendency towards perfectionism. The sweet and gentle middle section provides a strong contrast to the quick, agitated theme. This stark contrast between sections may be an expression of the inner conflict Chopin felt throughout his life. Liebestraum Notturno 3 by Franz Liszt, Chopin's most famous contemporary. Despite their clear differences, Franz Liszt and Frederic Chopin were actually good friends who saw each other often. Although Chopin thought Liszt's music was often vulgar and over the top, he admired Liszt's combination of brilliance and sheer aura. Chopin, in turn, helped Liszt realize the importance of poeticism, sweetness, and subtlety, as well as flashiness and power. During his lifetime, Liszt was known primarily as a virtuoso pianist. His technical innovations allowed him to display incredible virtuosity and to achieve the widest extremes of dynamics and expressions. By 1839, Liszt had established the modern concept of the recital. In Liszt's solo concerts, originally called soliloquies, he was the first to abandon the use of an accompanying orchestra, to play music from Bach up to his own time, and to perform everything from memory. Most of Liszt's compositions clearly correspond to his performance style: daring, passionate, triumphant, and intended for strong effect. Liszt had nothing to do with the classical style, preferring to invent his own forms, and he embodied innovation and individualism, perhaps more fully than any other Romantic composer. Although vain, confident, and energetic, Liszt was also widely respected as an honest and generous man. Starting early in life, Liszt talked often of joining the church and becoming a priest, but when his family encouraged him to pursue music over religion, Liszt decided to express his faith in his music. Unfortunately, despite all his religious fervor, Liszt led a life of epic, sensual self-indulgence. It is important to acknowledge the composer's sinful lifestyle, but we cannot ignore that he was profoundly impacted by Christianity. Liszt was painfully aware of the inconsistencies of his life, which caused persistent inner turmoil and periods of depression. Liszt believed that the purpose of music is, quote, to ennoble, to comfort, to purify man, to bless and praise God. In his 50s, Liszt received minor orders in the Catholic Church, and he considered his ordination the most important event of his life. As an adaptation of a love poem set to music, Liszt's Notturno 3 was inspired more by romance, poetry, and emotion than religion. However, this dramatic piece perfectly reflects the composer's energetic and passionate character. Liszt preserved the original song's melody while decorating it to create his own lyrical expression. The lyrics for the original vocal piece were taken from a German love poem, which translated says, "Oh, love as long as you can, because the time will soon come when you will cry by the grave. So be sure that your heart beats tenderly when another's beats with tenderness. Alas, harsh words are all too quickly spoken." Through complex accompaniments and dramatic dynamics, Liszt created a beautiful, poetic piece of music that effectively communicates the original poem's longing and passion. The Notturno 3 is an excellent example of Liszt's ability to affect his listeners, and parallels the profound impact he had on the world of music. I'll be playing is the Prelude, Opus 23, number 4 in D major by Sergei Rachmaninoff. In the 20th century, the Romantic period gave way to the contemporary or modern period of music, in which we still remain today. Contemporary composers' search for individuality and desire to stand out led to more diversity, new styles, and branching traditions. Some composers saw themselves as absorbing and continuing tradition, whereas others moved in entirely new directions. More radical composers chose to move beyond tonality, adding unique or dissonant chords entirely unrelated to the piece's key. Another important change in this era was the relationship of composers to their audience. In the 20th century, quote, modernists in both art and music did not aim to please viewers or listeners on first sight or first hearing, an attribute that had always been considered essential. Instead, they sought to challenge our perceptions and capacities. In the midst of this change lived the Russian pianist and composer Sergei Rachmaninoff. 20th century Russian composers either maintained a nationalistic, anti-Western style or continued to work within Western tradition. Rachmaninoff, however, refused to pick a side. In an interview in 1941, he stated that music should express not some stylistic fashion, but rather the composer's personality. According to biographer John Colshaw, Rachmaninoff's message was intensely personal, and for that reason it changed but little as the years went by. Rachmaninoff strove for a musical balance by offering something new and individual, yet steeped in tradition, creating melodies and textures that sounded both fresh and familiar. He was strongly influenced by Chopin in his lyrical themes and rich harmonies, and he achieved the difficulty and virtuosity of Liszt without such dramatic extremes. Rachmaninoff's music is authentic, clear, precise, strong, and logical, and he was one of the better melodists of his time. We know little about Rachmaninoff's personal beliefs. He was intensely private, disinclined to discuss his art or personal feelings with interviewers and journalists. Many of Rachmaninoff's works are clearly influenced by Christian music. However, he did not have a good relationship with the Russian Orthodox Church, and we are not sure if he was ever deeply religious. The closest we get to seeing the mind of Rachmaninoff is this statement. My constant desire to compose music is actually the urge within me to give tonal expression to my feelings, just as I speak to give utterance to my thoughts. Thanks to several recorded interviews, we also know many of Rachmaninoff's opinions on art and music in his day. In an interview in 1923, Rachmaninoff insisted that original music should be, quote, based upon the time-old principles of real beauty and not false art. He refused to share any outside sources for his work, believing that, quote, real inspiration must come from within. The sublimest of nature cannot produce any worthwhile result if the divine spark of creative faculty is lacking within the artist. Rachmaninoff's Prelude, Opus 23, number 4, exemplifies many of the artistic values that he believed in. In this piece, Rachmaninoff created a simple but lyrical melody accompanied by rich harmony, avoiding the common mania for cacophony and atonal character that he often criticized. His devotion to excellence creates a well-thought-out and polished sound. Because he was inspired by Western tradition and stood for the principles of real beauty, Rachmaninoff's Prelude exemplifies a balance between established standards and musical innovation. The slow, flowing piece reaches an intense climax in the middle, but resolves quickly back to a sweet and simple melody. As in many of his works, Rachmaninoff included many interesting but beautiful harmonies in this D major Prelude. His belief that real inspiration must come from within creates an intensely personal and authentic sound. This piece's tone is clear and precise, yet sincere and emotional, rather like Rachmaninoff himself. Thesis and Recital has been the biggest project I've ever worked on. Although it took a lot of time and energy, I believe it was a very valuable experience. I've never invested so much time into perfecting a piano piece before, much less 5 of them at once. Though it was sometimes difficult, I definitely enjoyed it overall and learned a lot from the process. This year, I think I have grown a lot as both a pianist and as a writer. This was a fascinating topic to research, and learning about the life and worldview of these composers helped me understand and connect to their pieces more. I'm very proud of the finished product, but after working on it for so long, I'm certainly happy to be done. I want to say thank you to everyone who has supported me through my senior year, especially those who provided assistance on this project. Thank you to Mrs. Anderson, Liz Friesen, Jude Johnson, Miss Sarah, and Miss Sammy for all the thoughtful and helpful feedback on my full thesis, and to Mom for helping me create the shorter version for today. Thanks also to Miss Sarah and Miss Sammy for being such amazing piano teachers the last several years. Thank you so much, Miss Sammy, for teaching me this year and for helping me polish these pieces and put together this recital. Thanks, Ella, for being my page turner, and for Audrey for doing my hair, and to my parents for the camera and Zoom meeting setup. I hope you all enjoyed the recital, and thank you for coming.
So proud of you, Elise. It's been so neat to see you really become a mature musician through this big project, and to see you grow in confidence as you took on, a really big work. These were big pieces on their own, and then to put them all together with that big paper, it's been really neat to see you grow. And I wanted to give Sammy, Miss Sammy has been such a great teacher. So Elise was studying with Miss Sarah Bellows, who is wonderful, and we loved her, but she had a baby and had to quit and right at Elise's senior year. So to transition from having worked with one pianist for 5 years at least, and then your final senior year when you're going to start your senior recital to have a new teacher we were worried about that working, but Miss Sammy has been wonderful. It has not only worked, it's been a great blessing, and we're really thankful for Miss Sammy. So Miss Sammy, if there's anything you wanted to say to kind of help wrap us up, turn on the mic, it's all yours.
Sure. Well, I just want to say that was such a moving and such a beautiful recital, and I kind of got to watch Elise and Ella just from afar because I don't think anyone knew, but Miss Sarah is one of my best friends, and so we kind of talk a lot about our students. So I got to see and I got to work with her very best star pupils, and that was such an honor and a privilege for me. It's been, I only got to have Elise for a year, but she's the type of student that every teacher wants, one that tries her best. She's really dedicated and hardworking, and she also brings laughter and smiles into the studio with her presence. So teaching her has just been a joy, and I was so happy that I got to steal her from Sarah when she graduated, even if it was only a year. And I'm so happy that she's gotten to do this really important thing that's just, she's played the piano and been so dedicated and diligent about doing this up until her senior year. And that's such a rare thing, and it's such a gift. And I hope that she'll be able to take music with her for the rest of her life. Her pieces, they were so difficult. I let her choose. I said, you can play this, this, or this. And then she happened to pick all the hard stuff. So I was a little bit worried about that, but she handled it so gracefully. And I kind of on purpose made sure that her choices would work for an undergraduate audition for music if she ever wanted to go that route. And I did tell her a lot that all of her pieces would be pieces that she might play if she was a junior or even a senior piano major for a recital. So I'm hoping that with her achievement of just being able to speak so well and eloquently about all of these pieces and play them so beautifully, that she takes Bach's Faith, Beethoven's Hope, Chopin's grace, Liszt's passion, and Rachmaninoff's vision with her as she goes into the future. And also she's going to be a Baylor Bear. And so I have to say, as a Baylor Bear myself, sick of bears. And so I'm hoping that she will find the same mentors that will guide her along her faith and her journey as I did there. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Miss Sammy. I'll take that out. Okay. Yeah, so Elise is going to Baylor and she is going to keep studying piano, although just a minor, not as a major, which means she can do this as something she loves and not something she has to make money at. So that's great. So thank you, friends and family, everyone, for joining and taking time out of your Saturday to log in and use your imagination to try and be present, even over Zoom. We really, really, really appreciate it. It means a lot for you all to be here. And we love you, each one of you. Y'all have been an important part of our life and really thankful. So thanks for coming. I think that's it. Bye. Love to all.